because a lot of these symptoms that people have in the perinatal time, whenever that looks like and however that looks, is very isolating. A lot of people don't like to speak it out loud for a variety of reasons, which I totally understand, and that's why therapy can be so beneficial.
Welcome to Wisdom Beyond the Womb. I'm Trisha Harris with Trisha Harris Photography, and today I'm sitting with Megan Williams, a therapist. How are you today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Mental health.
Yes.
We all need it.
Yes, we do.
So tell me, what type of mental health services do you provide?
Sure. So I'm a licensed therapist, and one of my specialties is perinatal mental health. I'm certified in perinatal mental health. I started working in perinatal mental health in 2017.
Okay.
That's when I started working at the hospital, labor, delivery, mother, baby, NICU. And that was a really cool experience to have just from the hospital side of things and not necessarily an outpatient setting. And it was really cool just to help, new parents right when things were happening. Sometimes it wasn't the happiest moments, and sometimes it was the happiest moments of their life, and to be let in to their lives, whatever that looked like, was really humbling and really helped me grow in learning their unique needs and what would best help them.
So you've kind of evolved. Like you said, you started in the hospital setting.
Yeah.
Now you're fully outpatient?
Yes. Yeah, working in private practice, and it's one of my specialties that I'm super passionate about. I love being able to help new families however I can in that way.
I love that you have the passion, because it really makes it easy for people to chat with you and just kind of open up.
Yeah.
So with that, where do you meet your clients? Is it all online, face-to-face, a mixture of both?
Yeah, a mixture of both, which is really nice, especially if people have hectic schedules or they are somebody that has been fortunate enough to have a child. They can pursue the online option. They can switch it up if they need it. They can come in person. They can bring their baby. I can hold a baby. They can hold the baby. Whatever they prefer, whatever they want. Try to make it as convenient as possible. Sometimes it's nice for them to leave the house and have a space that's just for them for an hour. But I totally understand the convenience of being able to, chat from home too. So either or, virtual or in person.
Wonderful. Having the outpatient services now away from the hospital and all that,
Yeah.
do you find some of your clientele are actually people who don't have children and are struggling in their journey to get there?
So the word, perinatal mental health, or the term perinatal mental health, is much more encompassing and inclusive, which really helps with people in the depth of their symptoms, because it's validating. It speaks life to what they're going through, because a lot of these symptoms that people have in the perinatal time, whenever that looks like and however that looks, is very isolating. A lot of people don't like to speak it out loud for a variety of reasons, which I totally understand, and that's why therapy can be so beneficial. So really using that term, perinatal mental health, instead of postpartum depression, is something that can be healing in itself for a lot of people, and recognizing what they're going through, that it has a name, that it is common, unfortunately, but that there's also ways that we can get them better. So when we're looking at the term, we usually use perinatal mood and anxiety disorders as this big spectrum of mental health conditions that's involving the perinatal space, which is usually from conception until a year postpartum. However, it's really important not to lose sight and to acknowledge families that might have a difficult time even with conceiving a child. Maybe they're struggling with infertility. There's families that have been through loss at various stages, right? It's also really important to acknowledge. But also recognizing that symptoms that go unresolved even after that first year can continue on for several years. And it's really interesting in my work, because even though I specialize in perinatal mental health, I have a lot of clients from different walks of life and different things that bring them to therapy. And I have, middle-aged women that will share their stories about how they never got to process a miscarriage or a loss they had. They come in for something totally unrelated, but then we're talking about and processing these big significant moments in their life that still continue to have an impact on them to this day. I even had, a client who came in again for something totally unrelated. They were having relationship issues, and they disclosed to me that this was the first time they got to talk about gender disappointment, that they were upset that they had, a specific child when they were really hoping for another child. And it's really important to acknowledge it. And like I said, speak life to those things, because the more isolating we feel, the louder those symptoms can be. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. I love that you cover an array of symptoms in conversations and touching on those things that do get triggered when something else is being talked about. Sure. What are the different ways in which you go about helping your patients? Because sometimes people think, oh, you're not just going to sit there and talk to somebody about it. Do you have other techniques that go along with your conversations with them?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I've really learned in working in this space is the value of listening. And that might seem so silly, but I think especially when you become a new therapist, it's all about, giving them practical solutions and doing all these things to help them and using all these strategies to help. And yes, those things can be really valuable when we're looking at helping them practically. But I think especially for people that are going through this vulnerable time in their life, when they start to share with other people, or if they share with other people, they're met with a lot of the help, right? That, well, you should do this, or I did this. And it's all really well-meaning, but they just want to be heard and acknowledged. And so a lot of it, I do take kind of a step back approach when we're first kind of working through some things and just allowing them and holding space with them to be heard. And then we can kind of incorporate and sprinkle in some strategies that might help them with their symptoms, with, life circumstances that are affecting their symptoms or exacerbating their symptoms even more. That's what we do. And I also really love using EMDR, which is another acronym, another big word in the work that I do with these clients. It's incredibly moving, incredibly powerful. It's very effective very quickly, which is nice. It's I don't know if you want me to go in.
Yeah, please tell us more about EMDR. What does it stand for? What does that look like?
Yeah, I could probably do a whole 2-hour series on it, so I'll try to condense it because it's really awesome. It's really good stuff. So it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So big long word that we call EMDR. And the eye movement piece is because it started back when Francine Shapiro developed this model. That's how things started. Was she was moving her eyes back and forth after receiving some distressing news, and then it just she noticed that it didn't affect her as badly as before, and so she kind of took that theory and ran with it, and it's just evolved over time and grown, and it's developed into the beautiful model that it is today. So really the concept is that we have past experiences. Some people will define those as traumatic. Some people will define those just as distressing, but things in our life that have shaped us, that have affected us to this day. That's just all a part of our walks of life, right?
Right.
And so the theory is that when these past incidents start to become active in our present life, that can really start to or underscore symptoms in the perinatal space specifically, right? Or just mental health symptoms in general. And the premise of that is we kind of have a snapshot of when we went through something or experienced something big or smaller in our life, and we kind of take that with us, and it's stored in the wrong part of our brain to where it can't get out. It's just kind of stuck there. So it stays with us, and when those things are triggered in the present day, subconsciously a lot of the time it takes us back to when those things that were distressing or traumatic were happening. So really we're responding to the past and the present. And that could be a big problem, understandably, because not only does that take us away from, being present in our day-to-day lives, being present with our child, being present with our partner, whatever that might look like, being present in our workplace, but it can also just lead to a heightened sense of mental health symptoms as a whole. So for example, if we grew up maybe feeling like our parents didn't give us a lot of validation. Maybe we just adopted this thought at the time, well, I'm not good enough. Mm-hmm. So we carry that with us. And when that gets triggered, maybe you didn't get a good performance review at work or whatever else it might be. Somebody cuts you off in the parking lot. Really, that heightened response that sometimes we see is from that, right, not this. And gosh, when you talk about entering into parenthood, there's a lot of times where we don't feel good enough and we feel like maybe we don't even matter, we're not important, because everybody's worried about holding the baby, everybody's worried about holding us. Mm-hmm. And so I love using EMDR specifically with people that are struggling with perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, because it's one of the most vulnerable times in their life, which can be very adaptive and healing, but it can also be a very, again, vulnerable time to experience heightened mental health symptoms. And so using EMDR to address what's going on in the present by healing moments from their past is a really great tool that I found useful.
That sounds like a really awesome tool to
have. I probably missed a lot of things because it's just really awesome and great, but to sum it up, that's how it kind of works. And I left out too, like the whole eye movement thing. We know why that's significant. We use bilateral sensations. Some people use eye movements that go back and forth. Some people use tactile tools, whether it's tapping or I have buzzers that buzz back and forth. We use auditory tools as well. And what that's doing is triggering both hemispheres of the brain to communicate. So that's how we access those memories that we have not been so great, that are continuing to affect us now. And reprocess those through the use of that bilateral stimulation. So we get it unstuck. So it's not at the forefront. We recognize that those things happened and it wasn't great, but it's not creating this feeling of distress in our life anymore. And I think that there's a big misconception too that it's unsafe during pregnancy, because, a lot of people, obviously it can be a difficult thing to work through, going back into memories that haven't been pleasant. And again, sometimes people describe those as traumatic. Yeah. But with a lot of the tools that we have available, it's something that's very safe and actually safer to do than continuing to expose ourselves and our unborn child to toxic stress that results in unresolved, mental health symptoms. And really, when we're doing EMDR, it's more of like an adaptive stress, like exercise would be. So just something to kind of recognize too, because I understand that that's something that people, get nervous about, and there can be a big misconception about in the community.
Yes.
About using that during pregnancy. So, yeah.
So there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and, people kind of push away and don't want to reach out and ask for help.
Yeah.
So how do you help them overcome the stigma in reaching out for resources, whether it's through you or online or something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think giving them that validation to understand that they're not alone in this can be a really big thing, because PMADs, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, are actually the number one complication related to pregnancy and childbirth. And unfortunately, they're the number 2 cause in the United States of maternal morbidity as well, which is like scary, right? Yeah. So, but knowing that, there's really not as much of a focus on it. Whatever doctor you go to, however you pursue your care, we give recommendations for, the supplement. We get recommendations for supplements, and we do all the research on preventing preeclampsia, or, diving into what is the best crib for my baby, or what's the best car seat. And so we focus on all these different areas, and a lot of these other areas are promoted, but oftentimes we're really left in the dust when it comes to mental health and how that might be affecting us and things to look out for. So I think it's giving that validation to people, and this is not your fault here. We need, as a community and as a society, to recognize this as something that's serious, as something that's prevalent, really to hone in on that prevention piece. And I think that gives people a lot of hope and understanding and kind of relief that, like, oh my gosh, I couldn't have known any better. And sometimes even when we do prepare as much as we can and we have the knowledge, it still hits us like a ton of bricks. You know, we can only anticipate things happening so far in advance, and we can only anticipate so much of how things are going to affect us. So that's something that's really understandable. And I really encourage loved ones too, and even people that are struggling, to start using language that is really addressing what they're going through. That's why using words that aren't just postpartum depression or postpartum, you know, that's a time frame. That's not a symptom. That's not a diagnosis. So really saying, you know, I struggle with postpartum anxiety or pregnancy-related OCD or whatever it is, you know, giving them that knowledge and education can be, I think, really validating and start to break that stigma and giving them the encouragement when it's safe for them to be able to talk about it with other people, you know, linking them with community support. Postpartum Support International has fantastic groups that people can access that are completely free online, whether it's grief and loss, whether it's a specific mood or anxiety disorder that people are looking to gain support for, whatever it is. They have a wide variety of groups that are completely free. And they also have maternal mental health hotlines available for people as well to gain further support. So just a few ways that people can get, you know, access to things that can help them start feeling better.
So you mentioned the term postpartum a lot. There's also the baby blues we hear. Yes. How do you know when it's not either one of them and seeking professional help is the next step?
Sure, yeah. So anytime either, you know, the parent or their partner starts noticing that things just aren't quite right, it never hurts to reach out to their provider or a therapist that specializes in perinatal mental health to see what's going on. Baby blues is usually the 2 or 3 week period. That's that normal adjustment. Sometimes we're weepy. We're kind of going through these mood fluctuations. We're learning to get some sleep where we kind of can, but the baby's needs, we're trying to figure it out. It's kind of that adjustment period. But when it starts going past that time frame where it's really interfering with our ability to function, we can't sleep when the baby is sleeping. Our anxiety is a point where it's very heightened. Our mood is at a point where it's very heightened. We're having really high highs or really low lows. We start doing things to kind of keep our anxiety in check, like, you know, obsessively washing bottles or constantly checking the monitor, you know, things that are really interfering with our ability to function on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, having a newborn is a tough transition,
right?
And that level of functioning might look a little different, but you shouldn't have to suffer. Motherhood, obviously, parenthood involves a degree of sacrifice, but it doesn't mean that you have to suffer.
Right.
Nobody should have to suffer through any of those things. And there's so many different symptoms that we could probably talk for hours about, but I think just recognizing when just something doesn't feel right, you know, it can look a lot of different ways. Increased irritability, but the biggest protective factors I tell people to look for and I help them with are social support and being able to draw upon that, whether it's for practical help or emotional support, but also sleep. And like I said, sleep is very difficult with a newborn.
So difficult.
So hard. But it's something when we can preserve those stretches of time and using our support system to really capitalize on that, making sure there's not these intrusive symptoms that are keeping us from being able to sleep even when the baby is sleeping. You know, those can be huge, and protecting and preserving mental health when we can use those things.
And then we can be better mothers in the long run.
Yes. Better mothers, better partners, like everything. It really affects everything. Mm-hmm.
So Megan, how do we get in contact with you?
Yeah, so people can find me on Facebook. They can find me on Instagram. I work out of an office called Discovery Counseling Services. So we're located physically in Merritt Island, but they can also book an appointment with me online through my Psychology Today. So there's lots of different ways you can get a hold of me or the office in order to start your path towards wellness. Yeah.
I love that. And another question that usually comes up on this topic is, are you strictly insurance or self-pay, or do you do both?
Yeah, great question. So I do offer I am in network with some insurance plans. So I'm in network with United Healthcare, Oscar, Optum, and I'm also in network with Cigna and Aetna.
Okay.
And then I offer self-pay rates as well for people. Yeah, great question. And if I'm not in network, which is sometimes thing that comes up quite a bit,
Yeah.
if I'm not in network, I will provide what's called a super bill, where people can get a receipt of the services that they received, submit it to their insurance in the hopes that they can get reimbursed for out-of-pocket benefits. So
Awesome.
happy to do that.
That's great to know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today. I loved listening to all of your insight and wisdom, and I'm really excited. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.